Ja Morant's days in Memphis might just be numbered. And if there's an organization that knows how to go after a distressed asset, it's the Toronto Raptors. But could they, should they, and will they are three very different questions. So let's ask them and see whether or not it makes sense for the Raptors to acquire Ja Morant. What's up, guys? I'm Zulfi Sheikh here with Raptors Republic. You can check out my work here on YouTube or at raptorsrepublic.com. And thank you for tuning in for what should be a very fun conversation. But before we get into it, please be sure to subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel. You can see great daily and weekly content from folks like Samson, S, Trey, Lewis, and myself, along many others. But now let's get to the topic at hand. Ja Morant, yes, two-time All-Star, former second overall pick, former Rookie of the Year, former Most Improved Player, and an All-NBA second teamer. The resume for Ja is already stacked as he enters year 7, very much in his prime. So if you're wondering how we got here, well, we don't exactly know where here is because if we're being clear, Ja Morant has not requested a trade, at least not officially. And the Grizzlies have not said anything about being willing to trade the star guard or shop him. And if you're then asking why the hell are we talking about it, because things happen fast in the NBA, and Ja does not appear to be a happy camper in Memphis right now. For a bit of background, after the Grizzlies blew a 14-point halftime lead to the Lakers on Friday night, Ja had some stuff to say, and rather than me telling you, listen to it from the man himself.
What went wrong for you today?
Go ask the coaching staff.
Do you feel like, there was anything you could do differently, I guess?
You go ask them. They had a whole spiel in here, so.
From the outside, and the outside may be wrong, but from the outside, it didn't look like you had your usual energy tonight.
Go ask the coaching staff why.
Okay.
You feel like you should play more?
Go ask the coaching staff. Should I play more or not?
What could have been
else?
done? What could have been done different to get a different outcome, other than asking the coaching staff?
According to them, probably don't play me. Honestly, that's what basically the message was after. So it's cool.
The coaching staff message was
It's
it?
cool, bro.
Very good. You didn't have anything physically wrong in terms of illness or anything?
Oh, no,
You
I'm
were
good.
under the
I'm
weather.
fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
All right.
Yeah, it's not surprising, but Ja was suspended one game by the Grizzlies for those comments. Coincidentally, against the Toronto Raptors on Sunday night, he was clearly very frustrated, and not just because it was his worst game of the season. He finished with a season low 8 points against the Lakers, only 2 of which came in the second half. He went 3 of 14 shooting, 7 assists. But beyond the actual game, he was frustrated because reportedly, according to Shams Charania of ESPN, head coach Thomas Isalo called out Ja for his effort and leadership post-game in the locker room. And if we're being honest, coach wasn't the only one to notice. A lot of fans, both Grizzlies and otherwise, were talking on social media and pointing out how Ja Morant's effort didn't really look like it was there. He seemed to be going through the motions, making some questionable decisions offensively in terms of shot selection, and looking pretty disengaged defensively as well. Look, is that enough for us to be talking about this? Or are we making a mountain out of a molehill here? I don't know if we're being honest, but clearly Ja Morant does not seem happy with his situation in Memphis. After Friday's dud of a performance by the Grizzlies, Ja is averaging the fewest points he has since his sophomore season. His 51.5 true shooting is the worst of his career. He's averaging a career low in minutes. His assist numbers are down as well. And the Grizzlies are very much a team that appears to be in limbo, whether you want to say that's because of injuries or just because of overall talent. And it's kind of drastic how fast things change for a team like the Grizzlies. If you go back just 4 seasons, Memphis won 56 games. That was tied for their franchise record for most wins in a season. They followed that up with a 51-win season, and that was the second straight year they had the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. And then obviously you had the year where Ja had injuries and he was suspended for 25 games. And then last year he comes back, he plays 50 games. Memphis wins 48. So just 3 wins less than their 51-win season when they were second seed. Now 48 wins had them as the 8th seed in a Western Conference that just kept getting better and better and better. And Ja Morant and the Grizzlies are very clearly not fine in the West, as he previously said. So it's not exactly clear what's next for the two sides. There does seem to be a bit of plateau in what's going on in their situation. As for the Raptors, just go back to this offseason to see why they would be interested in a guy like Ja Morant. Toronto was big fish hunting by most reports, whether it was going after Kevin Durant or Giannis Antetokounmpo. The front office was very clearly eyeing superstar level talent, even if the odds of pulling off a deal for one of them was unlikely, because at the end of the day, if you don't ask, you don't get, and the Raptors seem plenty comfortable asking when it comes to adding a star player. But again, could they, should they, and will they ultimately pull something like this off is a lot to consider. So let's try breaking this down. All right, let's start with could they. Could the Raptors trade for Ja Morant? And the short and simple answer is yes, they could, in theory, make this happen. And if you're asking how they can make this happen, well, the simplest way, albeit probably unlikely, is a 1-to-1 trade for Emmanuel Quickley and his $32.5 million cap hit. Ja Morant is owed $39 million this season. He's owed $42 million next year, and then $45 million in the final year of his contract in 2027-28. And according to Fanspo's trade machine, the numbers mathematically do work. The Raptors would be over the salary cap, but remain just under the first apron by less than $1 million. Again, I'm not sure how much the Grizzlies would go for something like this unless they are really ready to rip off the Band-Aid for Ja Morant. Last season, they did try to go away with the type of offense they run with Ja, but so maybe they can get more of that with IQ in the mix and play through Jaren Jackson some more. IQ has more off-ball juice than Ja Morant does. And look, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a big part of this equation. His 5-year extension started just this season. If the Grizzlies aren't going to tear this thing down entirely and stick with a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., then bringing in players over picks and draft capital does make sense for what their situation would be moving forward. And obviously, I know IQ's value is pretty low right now given his price tag and his production. But if Ja Morant really wanted out, that is something maybe the Raptors could try to leverage by saying like, hey, we will take this headache off your hands. You can have a guy who, by all intents and purposes, does seem to be a good locker room presence. People say he's a hard worker. His work ethic isn't really questioned by anybody in the front office or in the organization, and he brings positive energies to the locker room. So that is something that Memphis would be getting in return, as opposed to the situation they currently have with Ja Morant. Now, another way the Raptors could get this done is by including RJ Barrett in some sort of a package. RJ is owed $27 million this year and then $29 million next year before free agency. Obviously, the Raptors and RJ did not come to an extension agreement this offseason. So, yes, he couldn't be dealt 1-for-1 like Emmanuel Quickley, but the Raptors have a handful of young two guards they could include in this equation. Now, a guy like Ochai Agbaji, and his math does work here in theory, according to Fanspo. And for the Grizzlies, RJ and Ochai, who's set to be a restricted free agent after this season, they represent short-term commitments. So if they're looking to kind of clear cap space to make moves around Jaren Jackson Jr. down the line, that's one way to get off some money in the next season or two if they were wanting to go that route. The Raptors could also include Grady Dick in this situation instead of Ochai Agbaji if they wanted to include a player who was a bit younger, has a bit more higher upside offensively if they were looking to sweeten the deal here. They could also go with Jacoby Walter. Now, by the numbers, an RJ plus Jacoby trade doesn't work according to Fanspo. Jacoby makes around $1.5 million less than Grady Dick does. So the margins are really thin there. And if the Raptors really wanted to kind of focus around a framework of RJ plus Jacoby, I'm sure they could make it work by either involving a third team or doing some other maneuvering here and there. But overall, I think as a framework, you could use one of these guards here, whether it's Ochai and RJ, whether it's Grady and RJ, or it's Jacoby and RJ. There is optionality there in making a deal like that happen. Now, the one thing you do need to consider is that would put the Raptors at 13 players doing a 2-for-1 trade for Ja Morant. And to be cap compliant, they need to have 14. So an easy fix for that is just converting one of your two-ways, whether that's Elijah Martin, AJ Lawson, or Chucky Hepburn. They could look the free agency route as well. But either way, they would have to bring a player in to be at that 14 rostered players to be cap compliant. And another sticking point that you would have to consider if you go the RJ plus player route is you now have a starting backcourt of Ja Morant and presumably Emmanuel Quickley, which is a part of a very expensive starting unit, and the Raptors' depth would just get that much thinner than it already was. And you would really have to buy into IQ's juice as an off-ball player, similar to what he was in New York, for this to make sense in your mind. But overall, again, these are just frameworks that could work. Obviously, any deal probably wouldn't be so simple, especially from both sides. But I'm just not going to go down the rabbit hole that is the trade machine. But it should give you a good idea of where to start. Again, there you could talk about attaching picks as well. Both teams control most of their picks over the next 7 seasons. Each has around 13 picks available, so that is something you can kind of go into as well. I'm not going to do that, but if you are, and if you have any other ideas of how a Ja to the Raptors trade could work, or you want to tell me whether you agree or disagree with any of these frameworks that I laid out, let me know down in the comments below. Which brings us to arguably the most important question in this conversation is, should the Raptors do this? Should they trade for Ja Morant? And it's interesting because you really have to consider the fit of this. And honestly, any team that's trading for Ja Morant would have to do more of the fitting in the equation. Because since he's entered the league, Ja Morant has played a very specific style of basketball. He is a pick and roll maestro who loves to operate with a live dribble. Basically, since Ja Morant was a rookie, he's been amongst the league leaders in pick and roll frequency and amongst the league leaders in average seconds per touch. For better or for worse, the ball sticks with Ja Morant, and that is how he likes to play. The Raptors, meanwhile, don't play that way. Toronto is a bottom half of the league team in terms of pick and roll frequency. Ja Morant averages twice as many pick and roll ball handler possessions than the Raptors' top player and Brandon Ingram right now. And in terms of seconds per touch, again, Ja would immediately lead the Raptors because he holds the ball more than anyone on this Toronto Raptors team does or has under Darko Rajakovic. And that is who he is. Ja Morant is most effective with the ball in his hands, creating off pick and rolls, leveraging things like his speed, his athleticism, and his dribbling. And I don't anticipate that changing this late into his career, especially when he's had the type of success that he's had playing that way. But it is worth pointing out the Raptors haven't played that way in part because they haven't had a Ja Morant type player. And again, like I said, since Fred VanVleet, the Raptors haven't really had a legit lead guard in the traditional sense who can threaten defenses with his live dribble and mine advantages out of it for others around him. Emmanuel Quickley hasn't been that and likely won't be that. If you listen to Sampson and Lewis on their latest Bald Don't Lie podcast, they talked about Emmanuel Quickley as a pick and roll ball handler and just how he's not threatening defenses in that role. If the Raptors had a guy like Ja Morant instead, I would imagine they, like many other teams around the league, would lean into that style of play a lot more because of the requisite talent that they have to do it. Yes, Darko's vision of a 0.5 offense has been clear since he's been with the Raptors, but Darko Rajakovic was also with Ja Morant in Memphis during his best seasons. Darko was an assistant for the Grizzlies for 3 seasons before he took over for the Raptors. And during that time, Ja Morant was a 2-time All-Star. In Darko's second season in Memphis, Ja finished top 10 in MVP voting, again, won Most Improved Player of the Year, and was All-NBA second team. And obviously, that wasn't all Darko Rajakovic, but he has seen firsthand what a Ja Morant-led team and a Ja Morant-led offense can look like. So I think if he was to get a player like that, Darko would very much be willing to negotiate terms of how to run the offense and how to let a guy like Ja Morant thrive in the role that he's in. Because again, he has seen what Ja Morant can do at his best, which is why I can see a Ja Morant and Scottie Barnes pairing being pretty enticing. Now, look, Scottie Barnes and Jaren Jackson Jr. aren't the same players. You can say there are similarities in their builds and in terms of the shot areas they work out of. Scottie, I would say, slips on his screens much more than Jaren Jackson Jr., who is a bigger frame. But we've seen how effective Scottie can be as a roller, whether it's in the short roll or getting to the rim with a head of steam. Having a partner in Ja Morant who can threaten defenses and attract a lot more attention than a guy like Emmanuel Quickley, for instance, would open things up, I think, for Scottie. And even if you're looking beyond Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, when he's healthy and the type of screener he can be for his teammates, having a guy like Ja Morant driving off of those screens with the athleticism and speed that he has, I think it would really open up things for the Raptors in that sense. Now, the trickier fit here is between Ja Morant and Brandon Ingram. Now, BI doesn't hold the ball nearly as much with Toronto than he has in other spots that he was before. His touches and time per touch are both down this season compared to when he was in New Orleans. But when he does have the ball in hand, we know where Brandon Ingram likes to primarily work out of, especially in the half-court setting. We know he is a mid-range assassin. That's why the Raptors brought him in. It's to be a shot creator in those spaces that the Raptors don't have much other talent in right now. But the thing with Ja Morant is he's increasingly become a mid-range oriented player, especially this season. If you look at Ja Morant's rim frequency, it has steadily declined since his rookie year. And now this year, he's at a career low. 25% of his shot attempts are coming at the rim. Now that could be for a mix of things like his injury history and regressing athleticism, but also just the play style that he's comfortable with as his game has developed. But for what it's worth, he's still converting at a 64% clip at the rim this season, which is slightly above average for guards. But nearly half of Ja Morant's field goals this year have come in the mid-range. In fact, He's number one in terms of short mid-range frequency in the NBA amongst guards, according to Cleaning the Glass. And he's shooting 46% on his mid-range shots. This is very much a part of Ja Morant's game now. He has developed this knack for being able to snake off pick and rolls, get into the lane off screens, and then settle into these jumpers and floaters around the elbow areas and around the free throw line, which again is similar spots to a guy like Brandon Ingram. Neither of these guys have exceptional off-ball gravity, in my opinion. Neither is super frequent cutters. We know they can do it, but it's not necessarily a prime part of their games. Neither is a high-volume three-point shooter. Neither has been very overly efficient as a three-point shooter in their careers, especially catch-and-shoot guys. Like Brandon Ingram is a 36% three-point shooter for his career. Yes, he's shooting 40% for the season so far for the Raptors. But if you look at Ja Morant as well, he's shooting 15% from three this season. Obviously, that's a down year for him. It's a very small sample size. But for his career, Ja Morant is also a 30% three-point shooter. Neither of these guys really have that shooting gravity to that extent as off-ball players. So it would be interesting to see, with being next to another guy who likes to score in the same areas, who likes to have the ball in their hands, how does the other person react to that if that were to happen? So a lineup of Ja Morant, Scotty Barnes, and Brandon Ingram, and if you want to throw Jakob Poeltl in there as well, would be obviously super talented, but it wouldn't be without its concerns, especially when you talk about spacing, which has already been an issue. And then there would be even less perimeter shooting available in that lineup because you'd be taking one of RJ or Emmanuel quickly out of the mix as well. And look, you have to talk about the defensive side of the ball as well. Obviously, Ja Morant isn't known to be an all-world defender, even though he has existed in some pretty good defenses in Memphis. Obviously, those have been anchored by Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a former Defensive Player of the Year, but there's been some top 5 defenses in Memphis. Ja Morant has been part of that ecosystem, so I think he could understand that. And the Raptors have defensive issues with or without Ja Morant. I think physically speaking, in terms of his frame and what he can do at the point of attack, there is more to be gleaned there than what you've gotten with Emmanuel quickly so far for what it's worth. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Ultimately, there are very obvious risks to a major move like this. There's no doubt about that. Again, both on the court and in the locker room. So after less than 2 weeks of seeing the Raptors play, would I say they will go after Ja Morant? No, I can't say that right now. But like I mentioned earlier, things change very fast in the NBA. The Grizzlies and the Raptors are two teams that have expectations that they are very clearly not meeting to this point in the season, even though things are early. We just don't know how things shake up beyond that. This is Bobby Webster's first season without Masai Ujiri, who we all know very famously made a high-risk, high-reward gamble for Kawhi Leonard. We all know how that story ended. It is a different situation, though. The Raptors were a very different team at the time than they are now in terms of where they were in the competitive context of the Eastern Conference. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard was a rental, so the trade machinations of it were different compared to Ja Morant, who's under contract for 3 seasons. So there are differences there as well. But if Bobby is looking to put his fingerprints on a roster that is very much still built in Masai's vision right now, this would obviously be a way of going about doing it. And look, for all the baggage that comes with a guy like Ja Morant, he is the type of talent that the Raptors just truthfully wouldn't get otherwise, unless it's through the draft or through a situation like this. Because when Ja Morant is healthy and in the right ecosystem, he's a face of the league type of player. The NBA was ready to make him the face of the league. Nike gave him his own shoe. His highlights were everywhere as he was basically anointed the #1 box office draw in the league. Just go search the name Ja Morant on YouTube. Please do it after watching this video and not during. But one of the top videos that will come up is an NBA montage from last season of just Ja Morant highlights. That video by the NBA is over an hour long. I don't think the Raptors could put together 10 minutes of highlights from last season, let alone 60 minutes. At the end of the day, the NBA is an entertainment sport, and Ja Morant is a very entertaining player to watch and cover. So yeah, if I were in the Raptors front office, which I am very clearly not and not qualified to be in, I would be trying to make this happen. We say similar thing during draft season, but I would say fit be damned, bring talent in the door. And Ja Morant is arguably the most talented player the Raptors would have on the roster if he was on this team. So then I would say it's up to Darko Rajakovic and his coaching staff to make it work, point blank at that point. But again, I understand it is a very high-risk, high-reward gamble. There's a lot to consider when it comes to it, which is why I could very well be wrong in thinking that way. So I'm curious to know, what do you guys think? Do you think Ja Morant is worth the headache that he comes with? Or could he be offered a clean slate with the Raptors to revitalize his career that's truthfully been on a downward trend since he was a 2-time All-Star? Would you or would you not trade for Ja Morant? Let me know down below what you think. But I think that should do it for me here. I thought that was a very fun conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. If you did, please be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps the channel out. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel if you want to see more videos like this, and obviously all of our other daily and weekly content here. But as always, I'm Zulfi Sheikh. I will see you when I see you. Go Raptors, and peace.